Hi, I'm Mark Grand, and I'm here to talk about blockchain. Uh, I'm going to be giving a non-technical presentation that describes why blockchain is, well, such a big deal. It builds on money, which helps people to trust each other in a particular point in time. If you have some goods and I have some money, let's swap, and that's great. But it isn't quite as useful when things happen over a period of time. And blockchain is a technology that helps us trust each other when things happen over a period of time. So my main point here is blockchain is the biggest thing since money, which is a rather large statement to make, but hopefully it will make sense to you by the time I get finished talking about this stuff. So basic idea here is that all great accomplishments that civilizations have achieved have involved cooperation between different people, different groups of people. Money enables cooperation by facilitating trust at a particular point in time. It also has its limitations. Blockchain enhances cooperation by automating trust that happens over time, because blockchain allows you to have a record of what happened that multiple parties can share and they can all trust. So let me delve a bit into the history of money, because money wasn't always a thing. There was a time long ago when money just, well, hadn't been invented yet. So before money, you had small groups of people, just families or tribal groups that cooperated with each other because, well, they lived with each other and they hunted together and they all worked with each other. They all knew that the success of every individual depended on cooperation with other individuals. Sometimes groups would trade with each other. One group might not be great hunters, but they might make great spears, and so they might make spears for another group, and then they'll share in part of a large kill. Also, that works pretty well, but then you have to worry about you don't know how big a kill they're going to make, so you don't really know what you're getting when you do a trade like that, spears for a future kill. Barter was something that enabled farming. People could grow more than what they needed for their own subsistence and then trade that for other stuff. So without barter, that wouldn't work so well. But again, it's limited as to how far that can go. If someone wanted to trade grain and they didn't grow it themselves, well, how can they go and trust what's the quality of that grain? So barter has its limitations. Parties have to agree on the relative value of many different things. Pegging the value of many items to a single commodity helps. In the 1700s in North America, there were people who were making their living by hunting beavers and selling the pelts, and there were merchants who had prices posted in beaver pelts. And it wasn't perfect, but at least it was simple, which barter isn't always. Weights were a more complicated issue. There are a lot of things that aren't incountable issues like pelts. If you have salt or grains of wheat or silver, you really need to weigh it rather than count it. So the earliest known standardized weight happened around 3000 BCE. In Mesopotamia, they had something called a shekel, which was equal to 160 grains of barley. In around 800, the Emperor Charlemagne in Europe standardized weights called pounds and ounces, and they were based on different quantities of silver. But there's still problems with commodities and trusts. The grain that you get may be old and rancid. The bar of silver that you get may not be as pure as it appears to be at first. Trading commodities like that requires that parties have to trust that the things that they're trading for are what they appear to be. So coins were the first form of money. They appeared in some standardized weights in a kingdom called Lydia, which is now part of Western Turkey, was around 650 BCE. They were made of electrum, which is an alloy of gold and silver. And of course, they eventually wound up doing what a lot of people who have issued coins since then have done, which is to debase the coin by adding cheaper metals to it so that they can make more coins. So after a couple hundred years, they figured out that they needed to have some more standardization of the material, and so that they began striking coins that had a specific mixture of gold or silver. And these coins had the image of the King Croesus on it. And the image of Croesus made people trust that this coin was really what it was supposed to be, the right weight and purity. And the use of silver coins spread to Greece. By 211 BCE, the Romans, they'd been using bronze coins, but they started minting a silver coin they called a denarius. And they struck it in silver because it helped them trade with the Greeks. Now, the Roman Empire was vast. It stretched throughout most of Europe and into Asia. It was used beyond the Roman Empire and is known to have been used as far away as in India. So denarius was definitely a big success. Now, this has taken a few hundred years, but the denarius definitely did make its mark. One of the ways that coins were something that people decided they wanted to use was that you could pay your taxes with them. Initially, coins were something for nobility and wealthy merchants. If you were just trying to go to the market and get some food, coins were not something that you would deal with. You'd barter and get your food or household items. Coins were, well, fancy, not common. But when coins became a way to pay taxes, that increased the interest because not only did it give you a way of knowing that you'd paid the correct amount of taxes, and you didn't get into an argument with a tax collector about whether you'd given them enough wheat or whatever it was that you were paying in something else. So anyhow, as different kingdoms began to adopt this idea of coins, you have coins that were trusted in one kingdom, but not so much in the next kingdom over. And so as you get outside of the kingdom where the coin was minted, you have a problem spending the coin. And so that gave rise to the business of money changers. Money changers were people who just kept on hand different kinds of coins, and they would sell one kind for another, making a profit for themselves, of course. But they solved the problem for people who were traveling and trading between different kingdoms. The Roman denarius had an enormous influence. There are a number of countries that have a currency that is called a dinar or a denar, and that survives today until 1971, when British currency went decimal. D was the abbreviation for the British penny, which came from the denarius, and the Italian and Spanish words for money come also from denarius. So it had quite a profound influence on our civilization. Paper money, though, eventually did emerge. Around the 17th century, Chinese merchants began using paper money because it was difficult to carry around a whole bunch of gold or silver. And so they'd have gold and silver merchants who would give receipts for quantities of gold or silver. And these receipts, so long as you were within some place that trusted that merchant, these receipts could be used instead of that amount of gold or silver. And so they became the first version of paper money. Marco Polo, he was a European explorer who went to China and came back to Italy and wrote a book about how the Chinese civilization worked. And that was a whole chapter in there about just how the Chinese are using paper as money. So that idea took hold, and eventually it turned into banknotes in the more modern times. So the notes were based on gold, so that was called the gold standard. U.S. money, back in the first part of the 20th century, as recently as that, it would say on the bottom of it that it was worth $10 in gold payable on demand to the bearer. And the actual redemption of notes to gold coins was kind of discouraged because it was just inconvenient. After World War II, we just decided to stop tying our money to gold. First, the USA led in that. The USA reduced the amount of gold that was on reserve for each dollar that was printed. And eventually, it had gone down to as little as 4 cents for each dollar printed. There was 4 cents of gold. And in 1971, they just dropped the whole gold standard altogether. But the US dollar is still valuable because it can be used to buy stuff. In addition to paying US taxes, there's a lot of commodities, wheat, oil, a lot of international commodities that are bought, that are paid for in dollars, either because they're bought from the US or because the industry has decided that US dollars are a convenient way to set prices. Which brings us to money not backed by anything, which is kind of nuts on the face of it, but it seems to work. So the paper money that we've been using since the US went off the gold standard, and then other countries stopped pegging their currency to the US dollar, it is based on just the ability to buy stuff. If everybody agrees that a particular form of money is worth something, then, well, it is. So that set us up for Bitcoin. Money that's based on a limited supply, and that works so long as there's a, well, limited supply. So Bitcoin.org was registered on August 18th, 2008. In October, a paper describing Bitcoin was published by Satoshi Nakamoto, who nobody knows who that is. And then some open source implementation was released in 2009, and, well, things have been different since then. We now have cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, is the original blockchain application. So cryptocurrencies have security concerns that are distinct from the blockchain that they run on. Blockchain is just a ledger that is used to keep track of how much there is of a currency and who owns how much of it. So, but in addition to being able to track it, Bitcoin needed something to ensure that there was limited supply, but still allow the supply to increase so that, well, there could be more of it as people wanted to have more of it around. So Bitcoin came up with this mechanism called proof of work. Proof of work basically means that a computer, actually a bunch of computers, are going to compete to see who can solve a difficult computation first. And whichever one solves it first gets to either create Bitcoin or facilitate the transfer of Bitcoin and collect a fee for that. Either way, people are being encouraged, using this proof of work mechanism, to consume a lot of energy, waste a bunch of money, which makes for expensive transactions and a lot of energy wasted. So that's the Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was just the very first blockchain implementation. But what is a blockchain? Well, one way to think about a blockchain is as a distributed ledger. In other words, a ledger that more than one person has a copy of, and you're pretty sure that all the copies are the same. And the concept existed before there were blockchains. There used to be that if you had a savings account in a bank, they had something called a passbook. You can see a picture of it on the slide. And there would be 2 copies of this passbook, sometimes more, but usually 2. And what would happen is the bank would have a copy and the depositor would have a copy. You would go into the bank perhaps to deposit some money, and the bank would take your passbook and they would take their copy of the passbook and they would put it in this funny typewriter machine where every time the teller pressed a key, it would make the same marks on both books at the same time. And so the teller would enter your deposit, possibly credit you for any interest that you'd earned since you'd last been there. And then you got your passbook back and it had been credited with your deposit, and the bank's copy said the same thing. So everybody was trusting that things were on the up and up because they had these same records. So a blockchain is a shared distributed ledger. It's electronic, so every participant has their own copy, or at least you can. A blockchain can track anything that can be tracked in a ledger, including possession or transfer of assets between entities. Hacking a blockchain is a practical impossibility. First of all, you can't delete it because, well, there are many copies of it, so you'd have to delete all the copies, which are owned by different people in different places, and that's a practical impossibility. And then the nature of the blockchain makes it impossible to try and alter it without the alteration being detected. And most blockchains have a way of repairing alterations after they've been detected. So the exact techniques that are used to make blockchain secure vary a bit with the implementation. But the important thing to know about blockchains is that transactions are immutable, which means they can't be changed. Once you record a transaction on a blockchain, it is forever going to be whatever it is. So I'm going to this is the most technical slide on the presentation. Hopefully it's not too bad. But why is the blockchain called a blockchain, and what makes it so easy to detect that anything's been altered? Well, first thing that happens is when a blockchain receives a transaction, it has to decide, is the transaction valid? Now, if the transaction's valid, meaning that it follows all the different rules that that blockchain wants it to follow, then it gets added to the ledger, but it doesn't get added to the ledger all by itself. For performance and efficiency, it combines transactions that are received about the same time into a block of transactions. So we have these blocks that contain multiple transactions, and every new block has a link to the previous block. It tells us where the block is, and it also has in it a hash of the block. The hash is a computation that is made based on the contents of the block. If anything in the block changes, that hash value is going to be different. And so each block contains a hash of its previous block. And if anybody changes something, the hash in the next block won't match the actual hash that gets computed and checked in the older block. And so in that way, we will find that any attempt to mess with the contents of a block in a blockchain gets detected. And then while the mechanism varies, the blockchains have ways of replacing the blocks that have been hacked on that copy with the blocks from other copies of it that are known to be good and trustworthy. So beyond what I've said, what makes a blockchain trustworthy? Well, nobody's in charge of it, or at least no one entity is in charge of a blockchain. Some blockchains, you have a small group of hopefully trusted entities that are in charge of deciding what goes in there. Others are what are called decentralized, which means nobody's in charge, or at least everybody has an equal say. So transactions can only be included in the blockchain if there's some kind of consensus of blockchain participants. It may be that the rules for what this consensus are vary with the blockchain. It may be that, as I said, just a few that are in charge need to agree, or it's only there if the overall participants in the blockchain agree as a majority that a transaction is okay. And if it's not okay, it will find its way out of the blockchain and will have blocks that don't contain that transaction. But again, the details vary with the particular blockchain technology. One other thing to know about blockchain technology is that it is or should be all open source. This is important because if somebody tries to put in code that gives somebody some kind of advantage, it's going to be found eventually, because people look at the code in open source and they'll notice something that just does not look like it is right. So, having explained what blockchain is, let's talk about ways that blockchain can improve cooperation. So one of the basic things that blockchain can help us do is record something called provenance of assets, which is a history of Where did it come from? Who has possessed it? Who created it? You want to be able to trace it back. And the concept applies to different kinds of objects. If something has a serial number, then it's pretty easy to track it. You just record who has had that object with that serial number. Food is a more difficult item. It's produced in bulk. A can of sardines may say product of Canada, and so you know what country it came from, but maybe not able to track it down all that well. You may have individually identified items like paintings that have a linear provenance, where you can trace it directly from whoever has it now all the way back to the creator of the art. So when I say that linear provenance for art, provenance for some other things that are manufactured usually gets a bit messier. So here we have at least some of the provenance for sacks of rice. So if we start in the supermarket, we know that it came to the supermarket from a warehouse by truck. It came to the warehouse by truck from a particular processing plant. The processing plant received the rice in bulk by truck from farmers on whenever it received them. It also receives sacks to put the rice into from a printing plant on a truck. And that printing plant got the raw sacks from a sack factory by a truck. And we might trace things further, so we don't know where the sack factory got its materials from, but hopefully get the idea. So there are a lot of benefits just from being able to track provenance. Not that many years ago, the USA had to throw out its entire supply of spinach and romaine lettuce because some of it was contaminated. People got sick, and it took weeks to find the source. And if this were tracked on a blockchain, then we could say, oh, well, we know that there was bad romaine lettuce that was found, say, in these particular stores. And based on that, if it's on the blockchain, we know we can track it back to the particular processing plant that it got packed in, perhaps what date it was on, and we know what farms products were in the factory on those dates, and so we can track it down to the farm and possibly even the field. And so when we can do that much, then instead of having to throw away an entire nation's supply of a food because you don't know what's contaminated, you can pinpoint exactly what it is by tracing it back forward once you know where the problem was, and throwing away just what's bad, or at least a little more than just what's bad. So it's big savings there. Counterfeit drugs are a serious problem in some parts of the world. They're, to some extent, a problem in many parts of the world. And if drugs are tracked on a blockchain, then it becomes possible to have a mobile phone app that will determine if the drug can be traced back to its proper source. And if it can, then you can trust that it's legit. And if it can't, well, then don't take it. Some other applications for just constructing provenance are trying to see diamonds from a conflict-free source, wanting to know where your coffee beans came from, wanting to know what factory your clothing was made in, so you can have some confidence that it was made in a place that you think that the workers were treated in a good way. In a more complex scenario, blockchains can be used to keep track of supply chains. So typically what a supply chain might look like, and it's actually more complicated than this, but you'll have a manufacturer that gets the supplies for whatever they manufacture from suppliers who get the things they need to make those supplies from some other suppliers. manufacturer's customers might be wholesalers or retailers that sell to somebody else. So there's a whole chain of things that go in a few different directions. And not shown in here at all are the freight and logistics companies that are responsible for getting all the supplies and finished goods from one party to another. If shipments are international, supply chains include customs brokers and other parties that need to be able to access various documents. And what all these entities have in common is they all keep their own records. So if you're trying to figure out where something is in your supply chain, it can be difficult. You can find yourself making a lot of phone calls and having to look in different places. And it can take a while to figure out something as simple as, where's your shipment? So anyhow, blockchain, let me back up. There we go. Sorry, I skipped a slide that I didn't mean to skip. So a blockchain can provide a lot of improvements to supply chains. They can allow dispute avoidance. So, for example, I'm expecting something to be shipped to me, and I'm working for a company, and I'm asking, hey, where's my stuff? And the fellow that sold it said, we sent it to you. We have a receipt from your loading dock that says where it is. But even to get to that point, it's going to take a while. And then you need to figure out where it actually winds up. But if the whole thing is on a blockchain, then no matter how many different parties it came through, even if you don't know what the trucking company was that delivered the particular item, if you have a blockchain, you can see that it did land at your loading dock, and then you don't have to make all those phone calls. You can just ask the people at the loading dock, what happened? And they'll probably tell you something like, they sent it to the wrong floor in your building or something like that. Blockchain can be used to give what's called a 360-degree view of a supply chain. So suppliers can get a better idea of what the demand is going to be from their customer, the manufacturer, because they can see what the demand is from the manufacturer's customers. So that helps them to make better decisions and run more efficiently. Blockchains can facilitate just-in-time payments. So if suppliers can be paid immediately for what they just sent rather than having to wait 30 days, that saves the suppliers some finance costs and allows them to perhaps give their customers a little bit of a price break. Also, it's possible to have shipment swaps. For example, you can have a car dealership. They have a customer that wants a car that's has some very specific colors and options, and they don't have one exactly like that. But they can see that another dealership near them has ordered that exact car, and it's on the way to them on a truck. And that truck is going to be going near the car dealership that wants it, right past them to another car dealership, which is going to have to then have one of their employees drive this new car over to the other car dealership to swap that. So they can save time and money if the other car dealership knows that this car is on that truck. They can just talk to the other car dealership. The other car dealership can arrange for that truck to make a quick stop, drop off the car. The car dealership's customer is happy. The car dealership didn't have to pay to have one of the other dealership's employees drive it over and then be driven back to the dealership that they came from. So happiness all around. International shipping documents are another problem. If a customs agent wants to be sure that a particular shipment came from a particular place, there'll be a document called a certificate of origin, and it is issued by some agency in the originating country. And if it's a paper document, then they might have to pick up a phone and try and call somebody at that other country who is probably in a different time zone, and it's going to take a while. On the other hand, if the document is electronic and stored on a blockchain so that everybody knows where it is, it becomes very easy to verify the document and see that, oh, it was signed electronically and digitally by that other agency that issued the certificate, so it must be good. There are other uses, such as brokering space in trucks and shipping containers, so that people who don't have a full load to fill up a container or a truck can more economically figure out ways to match up empty space with their needs. And warehouse space can also be brokered in a simpler way. Property and casualty insurance can benefit from this sort of thing too. Right now, every time there's an 18-wheeler that's involved in an accident, there typically will be 3 insurance companies covering the tractor, the trailer, and the cargo. And the 3 insurance companies will send out 3 insurance adjusters who will all fill out the same paperwork with the same information, which is, well, wasteful. But right now, they can't trust each other to give each other the right information if they didn't send out their own insurance adjuster. If the information is collected on a blockchain, then the insurance companies can be confident that everybody's worked with the same information, and they don't need to have 3 insurance adjusters to do the same thing. Can help musicians who are having to deal with record companies or streaming companies. And right now, it can take a while to get paid. That's moving in the right direction, and blockchain is one of the technologies that has helped with that. It also helps. It's possible for established musicians to sell their own NFTs that fans can use to get preferential purchase of future recordings or concert tickets. Know your customer is a requirement for many types of financial institutions. And so that means that they're required to know who they're dealing with, so that if somebody's trying to launder money, they can be tracked. And that means that if you want to open an account with a bank, then you've got a lot of paperwork to fill out to prove who it is you are. But once you've done that, you don't want to have to do it again. But if you decide you want to open an account with a different bank, well, they don't have the same records. So you're going to have to fill out pretty much the same paperwork all over again. If you put this on a blockchain, and there are some identity blockchains applications out there, then you can go and fill it out once and just tell the institution you're working with that, hey, I'm registered on whatever that blockchain application is, and they don't need to know much more than that. It also helps to preserve privacy, because when you are giving people proof of who you are, you often have to divulge more than you want to know. If you go into a bar and they want to know that you're on drinking age, you have to show an ID, which is going to show your birthday, but is also going to have your name and address on it, most likely also. And that's not really any business of the bar. If, on the other hand, you had a blockchain-based application where you just show them your cell phone, it's got a barcode on it, they take a picture of the barcode and they see your face and something that says, yeah, this person is a valid drinking age. You haven't even revealed your birth date to them, and they have what they need to know. So you can preserve privacy. Web3 is another application, a decentralized social network. There are a number of efforts being made to have social media that's blockchain based, and so it can't be censored or moderated. It also means that you can have people owning their own data. If it's integrated with a cryptocurrency, it makes it rather straightforward for people to monetize their own data. Yeah, it can change the way people interact with each other, which is interesting. Also, there are a lot of blockchains where people's identities aren't even part of what's on the blockchain. All people do is they prove that they have whatever keys or secrets are needed to access or spend something, and they can do it. So blockchain offers the opportunity to get a lot of more control over your own information. People who make laws have felt the need to get involved with trying to regulate blockchain. In the United States, some of the states have passed some laws which are of, well, questionable wisdom. Arizona, Iowa, and Tennessee have laws that say smart contracts are binding. Well, smart contracts are just pieces of code that are associated with a blockchain, and they do whatever they do. They're not particularly smart, and they aren't contracts outside of those states. But in those states, apparently they are contracts. Not sure what that means, but we'll find out in time. California and Delaware allow companies to record on a blockchain who owns their stock, which is hopefully a step in the right direction. California has just passed a law that allows its counties to record birth, marriage, and death records on blockchain. Rhode Island has a program that allows participants to temporarily waive various kinds of regulations to experiment with blockchain. Not sure how that's working out for them. Louisiana allows banks to be custodians of digital resources such as NFTs or cryptocurrency. And Nebraska has a separate type of digital repository institution that they created. So where that's all going, who knows? But as the law gets involved, strange things may happen. We're not sure what the law is going to do with things. So blockchains get distributed across different countries without any way to really control the distribution. But there are countries that have rules about movement of data in or out of their national boundaries. How that's going to work out, we don't know yet. Now, since transactions and data can't be deleted from a blockchain, what happens if a court orders an organization to delete records about something that's on a blockchain? The EU has this thing called GDPR that gives individuals a right to be forgotten. How that's going to work out with blockchain, it's hard to say. And then you have organizations such as WikiLeaks, which have used Web 2 technology to keep data that governments and powerful people might not want to be divulged from being disappeared. And blockchain presents an interesting technology for WikiLeaks and whistleblowers such as that. Another potential problem is the fact that when you have these smart contracts and blockchains that are processing financial transactions, it happens a lot faster than money moves through banks. And so if you have money moving through blockchains faster than it does through traditional systems, somebody's going to figure out a way to take advantage and game the system just so that they know that some money flows faster than others. And that's a type of trick called arbitrage, which is usually regulated by bank regulators, but bank regulators haven't figured this one out yet. And then in many places, possession of kiddie porn is illegal, yet I understand that somewhere on the Bitcoin blockchain, there's a piece of kiddie porn that somebody uploaded, and the defense that everybody has, of course, is that it was not, they weren't aware of possessing it. So hopefully I've given you a understanding of why I make the big statement that blockchain is the biggest thing since money. So with this big statement, how long are all these transformations going to take to change the way that we do commerce? Well, we're already in the second decade of the blockchain era. And well, it took, as we saw, a few hundred years for money to be thoroughly integrated into commerce. It will probably take decades for blockchain to do the same, although it's moving more quickly, I do believe. But what needs to be changed in the technology, because I've already told you about some problems with the first version of blockchain, Bitcoin. So we need a technology that does not waste massive amounts of money and energy to mint things or to just process transaction. We need a technology that is not going to have a high infrastructure cost. If it costs a lot just to process transactions, then the transaction fees have to reflect that. We also need to have transactions processed in a hopefully short and predictable amount of time. Bitcoin doesn't offer that because, well, it can take minutes or days until your transaction clears. And another problem is with these smart contracts. A lot of smart contracts out there, if you may have noticed in the news, every so often you'll see something where somebody found some way of exploiting a problem with a smart contract. And so we need something that supports smart contracts that are less easy to run into security issues. So Topple is the company that I work for, and we are building a new blockchain technology that we believe will be faster and more predictable than Bitcoin and most of the others that are out there. Definitely more efficient in that the infrastructure cost of most transactions will be measured in millionths of a cent. And so the fees for transactions are going to be based more on market demand than they are on the costs of processing the transaction. And it will be more secure in a variety of ways that are discussed in other Topple broadcasts. So I want to thank you for listening to me and having heard me get to this point. And if there are any questions, please post them. I don't see any questions posted, but I'll take a few minutes. Well, I have apparently done either such a great job of explaining things that there are no questions, or it wasn't. Well, anyhow, well, there aren't any questions, so I'm going to wrap up this broadcast and hope that the people who see it enjoy this. So thank you for having watched this. And if you need to contact me, my email address is on this slide, and you can get more information about Topple at the URL on the slide. Thank you.